As I'm sure you all know, Tennessee is one of 10 states in the nation that was granted a waiver from the requirements of No Child Left Behind as it applies to the accountability system. So we now have a new accountability system in Tennessee. We're no longer under AYP. You know, for years we've been, every year we get the scores back, do we need AYP as a district, do the schools need AYP? That's no more. We now have a new system. There's still a lot of details about this new accountability system that haven't been answered. The state's kind of sending out information bit by bit. I'm going to go over what we know at this point. There's two overriding objectives in the new system. What they want to see is growth for all students in every area every year. And the other thing is closing achievement gaps. And that's by making sure you have faster growth for students who are further behind. And what we're looking at there is students with disabilities versus non-students with disabilities. Economically disadvantaged versus non-economically disadvantaged. I will say, and I'll say this over and over again, and it's what I've been telling our schools as I've been doing this presentation for them, this is going to be the biggest challenge with the new accountability system, is closing these achievement gaps. The growth every year, I don't think is going to be that difficult. We've been doing that. But it's closing the gaps that's going to be difficult. The other big thing that will affect us, especially when you're talking about closing these gaps, is that the in count is now 30 for subgroups. What that means, you know, in the past when we talked about AYP, let's use students with disabilities as an example. Hampton Elementary, their special ed population counted as a subgroup for AYP because they had 45 students. Hampton and Hunter were the only two schools we ever had that had 45 students in special ed. They were the only schools whose subgroup, you know, counted. Now they've moved that count down to 30. We will have a lot more schools now that will have, it's pretty much about all of them, isn't it, Dr. Wade? Except maybe Range, Little Milligan, our smallest schools. So that students with disabilities subgroup will count for most of our schools now. Economically disadvantaged, it always has, and that will continue. This chart just talks a little bit about the old system, AYP, versus the new accountability system. There's still, of course, it's all about accountability and transparency, making sure everybody knows our scores, how we're doing. Under AYP, they talked about unreasonably high proficiency targets. You know, we've all heard 100% proficient by 2014. And you know how those proficiency rates just kept jumping every year. Well, with this new system, and this is one of the good things about it, the proficiency rates are really attainable. It's going to be based on where your district is and where your schools are at a certain level, and you're looking for growth from there. So it is really much more attainable. Under the old AYP system, you had all these different goals, all these different areas in which you had to meet AYP. If you missed one of them, you didn't make it. For example, Hampton High School, Unaka High School, both of them last year didn't meet AYP for economically disadvantaged in math. It was just that one subgroup, that one content area. Well, the whole school didn't make AYP. In this new system, the way it's going to work is you're going to have a list of goals that you need to meet. You are either going to hit your target or miss your target based on meeting a majority of those goals. So as long as you meet a majority, you're okay.
Who sets the percentage of AYP? I'm talking about, we're talking about local. Who sets that?
Get that just a second.
Okay.
I've got a chart. And the other thing that's going to change with this new system is, as before, if you've had a school that didn't meet AYP, that they were put in high priority, you had people from the State Department that came in and worked. Like at Unaka High, they had somebody there for 2 years. With the new system, the only intervention from the state is going to be for a small number of schools. It's going to be for the bottom 5% of schools in the state. So they're going to be looking at working more through the district level with schools that maybe don't meet all their targets. Okay, so our district will have goals. We will set our goals to close the achievement gap and for gains in achievement. Both of those are going to be counted equally. And like I said before, will be measured based on either achieving or missing the majority of those goals. Now when it comes to schools, and then they will set each school will have their own goals. So Happy Valley Elementary is going to have different goals from Hunter. It's going to be different. It's going to all be based on where they are right now. But at the end of each year, when test scores are in, they won't say at the end of each year, they will do some of these every year. But the state will identify reward schools. Those are the top 10% of schools, and they're going to list the ones that on absolute performance, and that's proficiency, and they're also going to have the top 10% based on value-added gains. Focus schools are going to be the 10% of schools with the largest achievement gaps. And priority schools are going to be the bottom 5% of schools. We've also found out recently that if a school is in like from the 6th to 10% on this low end, that school will just receive notice and just kind of let them know that they're calling it on the cusp of being in the bottom 5%. As far as for districts, districts are going to be identified as either exemplary, and that means that they're hitting the majority of all their goals, whether it's achievement or closing the gaps. They anticipate that most of the school districts in the state will fall in the intermediate group, and that's where they're maybe achieving all their achievement measures, but maybe not closing all the gaps, or they're closing the gaps, but maybe not hitting all the achievement measures. But they think a lot of the systems will fall in that category. And then needs improvement, those are districts that will miss both areas, or even fall backward in one or the other. Mr. Julian, excuse me, this is what you were asking about. The state has set these goals. And these are the areas in which we will all be setting goals, the district and the schools. What they've shown us here is the actual percentages for last year, what our targets are for this year as a state, and this is the percent change. This is what you want to see in each of those areas. As you can see for high school this year, they're just using Algebra 1 and English 2 and grade rate. Next year they'll be adding Algebra 2 and English 3. They say we need to get a baseline year this year for those. So what we will do, and Dr. Ellis forwarded an email to Dr. Whaley and I earlier today. The state is sending us a data file with our baseline data from Carter County, and we're going to be working on that to set the goals. But we're pretty much going to follow the percent change that the state has indicated. But we do have that data file. I haven't had time to look at it yet, but they will be sending it for individual schools as well.
Isn't 2.9% kind of low? I'm talking about 7th grade reading. I know it's attainable, but you know, I hate to shoot for minimum. I like to set the thing a little higher so that we can work towards something.
Right.
We still meet the state.
Well, and that's one question that's yet to be answered. Okay, let's say we do set our goal higher. Let's say we do meet the state goal, but we don't meet our higher goal. What does that mean? Does that mean that we've missed that mark or that we've met it? And that question's not been answered yet. So I think we need to get the answer to that before we decide.
You know, I'm not much of a minimum person. I like to see things.
One thing I do want to point out, they did say when we set goals, they want to see at least this much.
Right.
And the only time that you should ever have less of a percent than what they're indicating is if you have a really good reason. And we do in certain areas. Grad rate. Danny, Hampton High last year, what? 92%?
Yeah, 91 point something.
Let's say 92% Hampton High School last year. You can see that's well over the state average of 85.3. Hampton High School does not need to grow by 1.3% this year. They can set that goal lower because they're already well ahead of the state. So that's just an example of where you might not, want to set a goal as high as the state's. And I think that's going to apply to, I know Cloudland's 90,
Yeah, 94.
94, 95, so.
I'm kind of on the line with Don over there. Even though you may be well above what the state recommends, why not set it a little higher?
Well, when
Is there
you're
any
already
reason
at,
you shouldn't do that?
when you're already at 94%,
Well, in graduation rate, I can understand that.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about in your subject areas here, math and reading, English. If we shoot for minimum, that's what we're gonna get. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do, but
And
I
I'd
will
like-
also say for this year, with this being brand new, until we see how everything plays out, because our teachers have been working this year not really knowing. It's been hard to set goals this year, period, because we've been under this system and they've been saying this waiver's coming. And we've just been telling them, just work for growth, work for growth. We haven't even really had numbers to work with. And because they're throwing this at us like a month before we test,
Yeah, I understand that. I just, I saw Tennessee set their standards low. And that's what happened. They were low. And the other states went ahead because they set theirs higher. I see systems doing the same thing. And when it comes down to it, if we don't shoot for our best, we're not gonna get the best.
I have enough confidence in our school system and our teachers that they're gonna strive for the very best. I don't care what their goals are. I mean, I'd say we'll blow these goals out of the water. I have enough
I think
confidence
so
in them
too.
countywide. I think we have enough good people that wanna be the very best. I want to see our system be number one where people in Memphis come up here and say, hey, what are you guys doing? You blowing this thing out of the water. I have enough confidence in our supervision and our people out in the school system that they're going to blow these things out of the water. That's all well and good, the state puts it, but if we go well and above, that's great. That's wonderful. That's just the type of people we have out here. I do believe we're going to strive for better scores.
and we
But
do,
during the transition year, you better stick with these.
Yes.
During the transition
You
year,
better get what they,
see what you're,
make sure, see where we are.
see where
You
you
gotta
are.
gauge yourself.
I
You'll
understand
be
that.
remiss by not doing that this year. You better stick with those.
It's kind of too late to set goals anyway. This increase is for 11, 12, which is this year. We're in the middle of March here. If we meet these goals of like third grade math of 3.2% change over last year, then next year the goal is going to be automatically set higher, which is going to do what I think we're trying to do. But right now, like she says, if we'd have had this in August, we might have been able to set goals, but goals, we've already done what we're in the process of doing what we're going to do. And hopefully, I feel like Kelly, I think the teachers have been striving automatically. I mean, they were under AYP, they were striving anyway, and I think it's just going to carry over.
it's working with different numbers. It's looking at, and we've got to learn this new system. Based on our test scores last year and what we've looked at, what the state has given us from last year, we would have met all these. We would have met all these last year. And we have some schools, and this is a good thing to me, about it being individualized between schools. We've got some schools that are far and away above these. We have some that's a little closer. We have some that's a little below. So, to me, that's a very good thing about this, is that it is individualized based on how a school is performing. And some of those schools, may want to set bigger targets.
Who knows what 12, 13 may be. You may have, instead of a 3.2 change, you may have a
Right.
5.5 or something.
And again, I think as we get into this new system, this is not gonna be the difficult part for us.
We may set it maybe
This
as
is
a
going to be-
system, but then individual schools could raise that if they wanted to. I was just looking at Clallan's, and I've watched them throughout the year, how hard those teachers worked, and they met AYP and exceeded AYP. They worked hard, and I'm not saying anything about all the other schools, because I'm not that familiar with the others. But I watched them work hard to do that. And if they put that same kind of effort, say that they look at this, a principal looks at that and say, well, I believe we can meet, like 4.5 there. Work toward that goal, even though the state and system sets a 3.1. Would individual schools be allowed to do that for themselves?
I think they would, yeah. Yes, the state is sending recommendations for individual schools.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And we haven't seen those yet. I don't know if they're in this new data file we got, or if that's just the district information.
It's just the district.
Okay, so they've not even sent us the school information yet.
These goals, this percent of change, is this a combination of the achievement targets and the gap closure targets? You might have
That one
a
on-
5% achievement target, increase and a 3%. Is it a combination?
This one right here is just for your percent of growth. Now, there's another chart.
That's the gap closure.
No,
The
this
achievement.
is just your growth, just your growth overall for all students. I didn't include the chart for the closing the achievement gap, but what it is, each one, it's all those same categories that was on that other chart. And the numbers for closing the gap on each of those, it's either 6.2 or 6.3. So what you're looking at is those students that are lower, that are in those subgroups, you have to increase them this much while increasing the others this much. So like I said before, this is what's going to be our challenge.
So you're saying this right here, this rate of change, like I said, the increase, you said you can go on each individual school.
Mhm.
But when the state sends this like to each district, is each district that much different from one district to another, or are they all pretty close?
I'm assuming they'll be different because it's based on your district scores. So.
They go back, take the data from past years, and that's what they kind of do.
Yeah, they give you the baseline data and they recommend the percentage of increase.
And that's something that's new too. We've never set goals like that before. The state's never given us that data and that
Race to the top.
recommendation. Yeah, race to the top.
I guess the gap thing, I said, I guess I have a problem, but I said, it seemed like you're saying, well, these students up here are this good, and these students may never achieve to close that gap up. If you're trying to get these up a
You
little bit,
still
but
want
you
to
say,
get those, but you've got to,
we don't want you all to run off and leave these back here.
Well, don't you think that new schedule will address that, since I'm talking about in the high schools anyway, that 45-minute period there to work with those
For
subgroups?
some remediation, there's no
and,
question.
Yeah, bring
That's
them
one of the
up,
purposes of that.
yeah.